Welcome to episode 10 of Back to Beverly, and thanks for listening. My next guest lives and breathes Beverly Hills like nobody else. He is the president of the Beverly Hills Historical Society and does so much to keep the rich history of the city alive by telling the stories of those who have made the community what it is today, much like I am trying to do on a smaller scale with the high school. He is also an accomplished TV producer and has had his work featured on broadcasts of the Oscars, Emmys, and Grammys. He produced and directed the Beverly Hills Centennial film, which celebrated 100 years of the city, and we talk about how that came to be towards the end of the episode. With all of that said, here's my interview with Phil Savenick. I hope you enjoy. Okay, cool. All right, so we're recording. So, if there was an official Mr. Beverly Hills, my guest today could certainly lay claim to the title. He's lived and breathed Beverly Hills for most of his life, and if my research staff is correct, can still fit into his Beverly Hills High School varsity letterman's jacket. He's spent his life in the entertainment business, working with so many of the legends who built the industry. I'm really looking forward to my conversation today with Phil Savenick, Beverly High, class of '69. Phil, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
So you've obviously done so many things. It's really hard to know where to begin, but can you walk me through when you came to Beverly Hills and what the city was like back then?
My parents moved to Beverly Hills, I believe it was 1957. So it wasn't, we didn't even have Rodeo Drive, it was Rodeo. And it was Wilshire Boulevard.
Mhm.
So that's the Beverly Hills that I remember so fondly. Was we were a little village. I mean, there were still the horse paths till 1955. So we used to ride our bicycles up the horse, the bridle path and stuff. So it was a lovely little village. My stepdad, Ben Norton, got involved in Beverly Hills politics and was on the council and was mayor in 1983 and 84. So then my mother was on the planning commission, which is, one of the most important jobs in the city, and for about 8 years. So when it came my time, I thought, well, I can't sit through those meetings, but I can make films. So that was sort of my contribution when the Centennial came around.
And what was it like growing up with two, with your mom and your stepfather who were so involved in Beverly Hills and were stewards in the growth of what we know it as today?
Well, basically, what I do is a tribute to them and the time that they gave to the city, the time that all the public servants give to the city. I honor them. What I remember most is just growing up in this magical time. We went to the best school and the safest school where we met fabulous lifelong friends. We would ride our bikes to Hamburger Hamlet, and we could debate the merits of Toy Mart or Uncle Bernie's. These were important things. And it didn't seem strange at all that movie stars lived on every block. So that was this very extraordinary, special experience that I felt was important to carry on. And I said, if we didn't tell our stories, who'd believe it?
Right. It's the truth. You mentioned Hamburger Hamlet, which I miss dearly. I mean, I grew up going to the one on Beverly Drive there, and it was just sad to see that go. So you grow up in Beverly Hills and you end up at Beverly in a pretty cool time. In '67, the Doors appeared in the auditorium. And then in '69, meant that the boys basketball team ends up winning the CIF championship. What do you remember about those years? Were you at the concert? Did you go to that game? Can you tell me a little bit about it?
It was the cusp of a very naive time to a very aggressively protesting time.
Hmm.
Obviously, we were in school. In a few years, we were eligible for the draft. So that was sort of hanging over our head.
Right.
But basically, Beverly was this wonderful little cocoon, this greenhouse where everybody flourished.
Mhm.
You found something you were interested in or that you were good at, and you were allowed to pursue it. And so we weren't really affected that much by the outside world. I remember there was a teacher, Lyle Suter. He was fascinated how I could be on the football team and in an art class, those kind of things. But he said, if you're interested in both, if you excel at both. So I think Beverly was sort of this magical opportunity for us to learn to be winners.
Yeah. You mentioned it briefly in your response, sort of the thought of the draft hanging over your head, and it was the end of a tumultuous decade. Was it on the top of everybody's mind, as you're near 18 and be eligible for the draft? Were the kids protesting it? What was it like? Did you have classmates that went off to the war?
First big protest was 1967 when President Johnson was in Century City.
Hmm.
Remember, I was very young. I was still very much influenced by the propaganda of patriotism in those years. Uh, my mind really would change when I got to college and could had some critical thinking.
Hmm.
So during the 60s, the end of the 60s, obviously we knew, 68, the Tet Offensive, you knew it was going off course. But really, and my years at Beverly were not about protest. They really were about learning and meeting people and being able to uh, find things that you were good at. That seemed learning to think, things like that.
Yeah. Do you think Beverly was a little bit of a bubble in that? I mean, when I was at Beverly, I felt like we were sort of in our own bubble, which was great in some respects, but it also I felt like shielded us from some of the real world things going on. Did you feel a little bit of the same back then?
I think we were aware of the real things going on. In other words, as a senior, we had a Black Studies program, and we read Richard Wright and Baldwin, and so we were certainly exposed. We were there right in the midst of the civil rights movement, things like that. We were affected.
Sure.
The war was because you were often define your own family,
Yeah.
so it was a longer sort of process of consolation on both sides. What's really happening? What does patriotism really mean?
Sure. So pivoting a little bit, obviously a lot of people that graduate Beverly tend to stick around the city, much like you did. Classmate of yours and my old golf coach, and I emphasize old, Jason Newman comes to mind. Do you stay in touch with anybody that you graduated with? Do you have a lot of friends from that era?
I still feel like I'm in my hometown.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see people all the time. The best story was when I was 25. I got my first big break being a writer and producer at 20th Century Fox
Uh-huh.
on a show that's Hollywood about the history of the movies. And on the piece of paper they sent out that has everybody who's on the show, theirs was Alan Duke's name. I called him up. I said, use the same Alan Duke I knew in the second grade. He went, of course. And we've been friends and worked together on and off ever since. So yeah, it was sort of a hometown industry. If we were in Detroit, we'd be making cars. Out here, we were television and movies.
Yeah, it's sort of the magic of growing up here, I think. So I want to get to a little bit about how you got started working in showbiz. So how did you get started working, and is it true that your first job, while still at UCLA, was working on Elvis Presley's last movie?
Basically, UCLA was another example of I was allowed to find things that I did well and do them. And I had done a picture book, and the professor gave it to a former student of his who was making Elvis Presley's last movie.
Hmm.
And he said, I think you should meet this kid. You'll like his eye. I met people that day who I'm still friends with and have worked with over the years. And that's 50 years ago this month.
It's incredible.
Uh, Basically, my route was not unique, but a little different in that people would see what I could do.
Mhm.
And then, oh, he could do that for us.
Right. So it would just snowball essentially. Your work would just lead to more work, which is great. So it seemed to push you a lot into TV and film music projects. Was that always the plan? I was doing some research. You produced a film for Bob Dylan. What was it like working with that talented creative genius?
Well, music was our voice in the 60s. So these were the people who said what we felt, what was in our heart. So I had obviously great interest in being in the music business. And for a while, it looked like that was the direction I was going. When I was 23, I worked on this project with Dillon, one with John Lennon, one with the Rolling Stones. I thought I was on my way. And then television came along, and although I did come back and do videos when MTV was born. I did about a dozen then. Mostly, I had started in music and thought that was really going to be something. And then just ended up, I had a niche.
Yeah.
And if somebody wanted storytelling made up of other pieces, they would call me.
So it segues nicely into my next question, which was that at some point it appeared you became the go-to guy for these TV specials and documentaries detailing Hollywood and the history of it, including 50 years of television, CBS, ABC's 40th, HBO's 20th anniversary specials, and so many more. What do you remember about those projects? And take your time because obviously they're all very fascinating. All these, the tales.
Well, the thing I remember most is what is every kid's dream? To get paid to watch television.
Yeah.
So I achieved that very, very early. I remember one year I was producing and co-directing Donald Duck's 50th birthday. And my mother called me at work and she said, "Are you busy?" And I said, "Well, I'm watching Donald Duck cartoons." And she said, "Well, you're working, I won't bother you." So at that point, I realized my dream had come true. As a kid, I watched cartoons. I spent 17 years at Disney. As a kid, I loved comedy and comedy records. I was able to spend 7 years at HBO doing comedies. I did the history of the Fox studio and the Warner Brothers studio and the Disney studio and HBO and CBS. So basically, I watched all this wonderful television that I remembered from when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and found ways to present it to new audiences so that it told a story, it meant something.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
if you do that really well, that was the entertainment value of a lot of programs, especially award shows. Award shows are kind of like high school graduations where you don't know the kids or you don't know most of the kids.
Mhm.
So when we would do clips or we do a tribute to somebody, it really raised the evening. It was really fun. And I have one story about that. I was working on the Academy Awards one year, and Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon were going to give an award. And the producer said, I'd love to do a little tribute to them. I'd like you to do it. Can you keep it under a minute? How do you sum up everything that is Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon in under a minute? So my idea was to look at every movie they made and just pull out the lines where one of them said, "You know what you are? I'm just a," and that way it established who they thought they were, who the other guy thought they were, what their relationship were, and I made it work in under a minute.
Brilliant. I mean, it takes a creative mind like that, right? Yeah.
Wonderful challenge, wonderful assignment. Could not believe I was getting paid to watch funny movies.
Yeah. Seems like the dream. So you touched on a little bit, but your works appeared on the Oscars, the Emmys, the Grammys, and so many other iconic programs and events. What is that process like? Do you get free reign? It sounds like you do, or is there some sort of a roadmap that's sort of provided to you in direction?
Well, first off, I'm sorry I answered your question before you asked it. I won't do that again.
That's fine.
I went through a lot of phases of the entertainment industry that went away. So if I started on a variety shows, my first show was the Smothers Brothers show. Well, variety shows went away. MTV videos went away. TV specials went away. When I worked on home video, VHSs for kids, the VHS, all of home video went away. So each time I would sort of have to morph and evolve. And one of the things had to do with one of the last bastions of when somebody got out on a stage and entertained was an award show. There was just that period of time and they were pretty dull. So when, one of my segments would come up, it would really be fun. I got to do the lifetime tribute to Paul McCartney for the Grammys one year. Yeah. Those kind of things where I would have paid to do the job. And yet I was lucky enough to be the one asked and sort of dive in and see what's there. So it basically you have to be asked to dance. And when you do, they treat you with respect. Oh my gosh. And I have two award show stories about the Oscars, and I'll make them quick. The best moment, the worst moment. Mm-hmm. Best moment ever at the Oscars, Mr. Savenick, these two men will help you carry your gift basket to your car. That's the best. The worst, we're really sorry, but the dance number ran long. We have to cut your film.
Oh gosh.
Wow. So I've had a little agony, a little ecstasy, but it was just such an honor to be on such a classy show and such a great, way to present the thing I loved, which were the movies and the movie stars.
Right. It's like the old adage, if you find something that you love doing, you'll never work a day in your life. And it sounds like you sort of hit that on the head. So we sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but do you ever bump into Beverly grads in your work, and have you ever worked with any of them? It sounds like you did. I mean, from the second grade on, but are there any other stories of folks that you graduated with, or from around town that you've sort of done work with?
Well, the most amazing thing about Beverly grads is they didn't have to be in your class.
Right.
Um, Basically, we have the same experiences whether we're 10 years one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a family. So the Beverly High family is much broader than all that's required to be in the Beverly High family is that when somebody says, "Oh, where did you grow up?" you have to say, the West Side."
Yeah.
Then you're
I don't know when that's ingrained in you. I think maybe when you start kindergarten at whether one of the four schools, but it's like it's never Beverly Hills. It's always West LA or the West Side. And I was watching the Only in Beverly Hills clip that you did, and that was funny that you had all these people say, "Well, where'd you grow up?" It's always West LA or West Side. Um, so
well,
you
there's things we have in common regardless of when we grew up because it's the same place. Now, one of my favorite stories is Beverly Hills was originally inhabited by Indians, okay? And they were known by many names. The most common is the Tongva.
hmm
Now, the Tongva had no written language, all right? So they built nothing, they destroyed nothing, they left nothing behind. They ran around naked, they swam in the swamps, they hunted in Benedict Canyon. They were like these happy hippie Indians. Now, the word Tongva just means, oh, the people who live here. So my feeling is that's us. We're
right.
the people here. We're part of this soil, we're part of this town, and you can't shake it off you. We're Tongva.
It really is. It is ingrained in you. So you produced the Centennial movie celebrating the history of Beverly Hills in the 100 years. Firstly, how did you get the job, and how daunting of a task was it to produce such a incredible celebration of history?
That's a good story. Around, well, in the 21st century, I've been a little embarrassed by how Beverly Hills has been portrayed in the media.
hmm
Ridiculous rich people, the housewives, the restaurants, or the nail salon, or the realtors. It was this view of opulence and conspicuous consumption that quite honestly offended me. And I felt that somebody who grew up here and who knew what being from Beverly Hills was about should make the film. The Centennial Committee did not agree, so I just made the film. Uh, Thankfully, Ben Norton had honored me with enough of resources for me to honor he and all the pioneers of our city, and we just went and we did it. And we interviewed all the people that we could find and people who knew people because they were the eyewitnesses to our history. We don't want somebody saying, "Oh, well, I heard," when we could have somebody say, "Well, I saw,"
Right.
or "Mom did," or those kind of things. But I wanted a film that used the word our town, our community, because the other vision was about hotels and cars and shopping and all of these images of Beverly Hills that, yes, they do exist, but there was something authentic that I felt was important that only you in this medium that I could in those. Robbie Anderson did the book that's on our website. So a lot of us kind of contributed what we do best. And so that people would remember why Beverly Hills is such a big deal.
Yeah.
It isn't because there's 3 blocks of shopping and a sign to get your picture taken at. It's because it was really a legendary place. And to me, Beverly Hills was not about rich people. It was about greatness. These were great people, the greatest creators of motion pictures and music. And they lived here. They were our neighbors. And that to me set the bar really high. What's it like to be in Beverly Hills? To be great, to try to be great, to do, know that that's a possibility.
Right. Yeah. And to your point, it does seem like the view of Beverly Hills has been distorted over the years, at least with with the Housewives and all these different shows that have sort of played up to the wealth and the opulence of the city, and what's lost is the stories and the people that built Hollywood and lived in Beverly Hills and told the stories. So That's why we're still around and we're doing it on our own. Um, how hard was it to tell the history in one volume? I mean, do you wish that you could have done it across 8 episodes, or was it did you have a vision?
I did 6 episodes for Beverly Hills Television Channel.
Okay.
We did the movie, which we ran at the Wallace and we ran at the Academy. Then I cut it into little pieces and we run it at the schools. But what's really cool is we put it in the parks. So if you go to Will Rogers Park, for example, there's a little plaque and you scan it with your phone and who's Will Rogers? Why should we care?
Yeah.
Why is everything named after him?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Charlie Chaplin made a movie in that park.
Yeah.
Well, I got permission from the Chaplin estate. You can watch the movie and stand where he stood and watch him running, down there's the fountain, there's the hotel. So we started to bring history to where it happened. At the Beverly Hills sign, well, here's the history of the sign and our gardens. And here's the story of Rodeo Drive when it used to have a racetrack for, Indy cars, when it used to have horses going up and down. It isn't just this sort of name brand imagery. It's what makes Beverly Hills so cool, what made it great, what made it legendary, and letting our visitors interact with our city now and then, right where they are. They walk 3 blocks, they take a selfie, they get on their phones. We give them really cool stuff for the phone.
Yeah.
And all of your viewers, it's called the Beverly Hills Experience. It's completely free. We don't track you. We don't sell you anything. It's just something really cool so that if somebody comes to town, it's got a walking tour of where all the movie stars used to live, or Rodeo Drive. So you're like this expert. It's got videos on it and the stories. So basically, it's all the things we cared about from our era. We've got videos, the Howard Hughes plane crash, Lucy versus the Tourists, one of my favorite. Tourists used to come and have lunch on our lawn. She went to Jimmy Stewart, who lived next door. She says, "What do I do?" He says, "Well, you wait till they lay out all their food and then you turn on the sprinklers." Yeah. So these are the kind of things that are just make going and being in our city fun. It makes the experience of being in Beverly Hills more fun. And like I said, it's also got access to Robbie Anderson's 408-page book, lavishly illustrated, about the history of Beverly Hills. His great-grandmother built the Beverly Hills Hotel before we were even a city.
That's right.
So we're taking all these great assets and all of our archives and trying to put it in a way that the Beverly graduates, the people who lived in our town who really care, have access to it and can enjoy it and share it, so that when we're gone, you guys can pass on the great stories.
Right. And it's great for the folks that come and visit the city who may just think of it as Rodeo Drive or the Housewives to actually interact and get some of these fun stories that the rest of us know, but aren't necessarily widely known. So one last question about the Centennial movie before we move on. At the premiere, I think you had the Beverly Hills Marching Band there, as well as an American treasure, Betty White. What was that night like, and what was it like working with Betty White?
The Centennial, the Centennial concert was a fabulous night. Basically, it was for the residents. A lot of what Beverly Hills does is for visitors or for the businesses. This was just for us. And it was completely appropriate the high school band should play. Yep. And Betty should come out and sing the alma mater because she was an old Norman. And they played music written by Gershwin, who lived in Beverly Hills, and all of the composers. So it was really a hometown night. It was quite wonderful, and I was really glad I was able to contribute. The moment of the evening for me was I did a montage to the way we were. And one of the pictures was of a restaurant called the Nibblers. I don't know if that was in your era.
Of course.
And the music is playing, and suddenly this photograph comes up, and somebody in the audience gives out an audible sigh. And I wrote on the Facebook, that meant so much to me because I could hear they couldn't contain. And the woman wrote back and said it was me. And for those 5 seconds, I was having the early bird special with Grandma. Oh. That's what the Historical Society should be. And that's sort of what we're trying to do is we all have these wonderful memories of our town. Right. This is kind of a place and a way for us to enjoy them and share them and remember them and learn and laugh and all that other stuff.
Right, and relive the glory days. So you touched on a little bit in your answer there. Can you talk about your involvement in the Beverly Hills Historical Society? How long has it been around, and how are you guys funded?
Beverly Hills Historical Society's been around since 1984,
Okay.
and they collect things. And we had some wonderful donors. Mark Wanamaker had a collection of 3,000 high-resolution photos of the city going back to the teens, things like that. Robbie Anderson, as I've said before, donated his book, and he is one of the prime sponsors. Basically, if something is worth doing, we have private sponsors who come up and step up and go, well, then do it. So I have that advantage of what we're doing is authentic. What we're doing, we hope, touches people who are our peers, no matter what age they are. And Beverly Hills is the kind of community where if something's worth doing, somebody will pay for it.
Yeah, that is the beauty, right? And they do it out of the goodness of their heart so that it can live on for generations. And we talked about that a lot. Now I got a fun one for you. Who would you think would win in a city trivia contest? You or a guest they just had on the show, Allison Martino?
Well, I adore Allison. And since ladies first, I will say she would win. But the truth of the matter is, she's much younger than I.
Yeah.
So there are stories that I would remember that she wouldn't, and there are stories she would remember that I wouldn't.
Sure.
But love what she does. Basically, she was that little girl on Rexford. I remember. And her across the street neighbor was Edward G. Robinson. Eddie had the best art collection in the city, world class. As a kid, if you were invited in to see that was, who would believe these stories, really?
Right.
So we both we know that we grew up in Wonderland and just never quite got over it, and we love sharing it with others. So in different ways, but I adore what she does.
Wow, a very diplomatic answer. So you're a Cable Ace winner, Golden Eagle, Spur Award winner, and you've had 3 Emmy nominations. How gratifying are the awards, and is it true that it's just an honor to be nominated?
In terms of awards, yes, it's an honor to be nominated. In terms of going to the ceremony and losing, it's not that much fun, no matter how think you are and how poised. The awards are not as important as occasionally we would get letters from civilians. Now, my era, there was no internet, there were no computers. So we really had no idea who the audience was. 30 million people watch the show, you don't know 2 of them, that kind of thing. But every once in a while, a letter would creep through, sent to the studio or whatever, where something we did touch someone, or it changed them in a way. Or in the case of autistic children, I used to do the Disney sing-along songs. And the music would sometimes unlock passages for them to move through. And those were the letters that really meant something. With the invention of the internet, now I realize I was, the babysitter of an entire generation with those tapes. But at the time, even a little bit of feedback meant so much.
Right.
Because we really didn't know the audience.
Yeah. And to know what kind of impact you were having on people out there that were watching what you were producing.
When that happened, that was actually more important than an award.
Right.
Besides, I lost an award to a sock puppet. Jerry Lewis and Lamb Chops beat me one year. So, how serious can you take this thing?
Right.
I lost
Before I let you go, I just want to ask if there's one piece of advice you've ever received or something that you would share with a student at Beverly that's looking to follow a similar career path that you've taken.
Well, I'm always welcome to talk to anyone from Beverly, including yourself, if you'd like to get involved in the kind of field that I was in. We certainly are looking for younger people to interact with, to take over the whole idea of preserving Beverly Hills history. Being class of 69, you can do the math, so obviously we want to kind of light a fire under people and get others involved in the new history. But that was not your question. Your question was about advice. And I'm going to phrase it like this. It's the advice that I gave people. I was a producer. People always say, oh, yeah, what does a producer actually do?
Mhm.
Well, this is the story and this is the advice. You have to be able to do anything, and you have to be smart enough. You can't do everything.
Interesting.
Whatever happens in your life, you have to be prepared, but you have to be smart enough to know, pick your fights. There are things you're not going to get to.
Right.
So that is producing and life in a nutshell.
Fascinating.
But anyway, I love this opportunity to kind of introduce the Beverly Hills Historical Society to a whole new audience. And because we would love to get younger people involved and get your stories in. And if we get to run our Beverly Hills 100 stories again, hopefully we'll have new stories from new people. You know, it's a evolving and growing city. It's an evolving and growing story. And thank you for all of your efforts.
Of course, and a special place for all of us who have grown up here. And I can't thank you enough for taking this time and a virtual trip back to Beverly with me today. We have a lot more to cover, I'm sure. So hopefully, would you join me again when I'm back on campus in the KBEV studio?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we made a special film that is on the website all about the schools.
Oh, wow.
There's a clip all about the swim gym, you know, and the movies that were shot there and how the floor works, that stuff. Another one about all the campuses and how they came to be and the famous graduates. And there's a film on John Ingle, if you ever want to do a show on him. Joel Preston gave his last interview to us and told us, you know, reflected back on a lifetime. Yeah. So any of our resources you'd like to use, anytime you'd like me to come back, thank you so much for all that you're doing.
I appreciate it, Phil. Thanks so much.
Thanks again for listening. And just a reminder, if you enjoyed this interview, hit that subscribe button, leave me a review, and tell a friend. You can also find me on social at Back to Beverly on Instagram. Till next time, I'm your host, Dillon Curtis, signing off.
Did you press record?